Mesopotamia, a name that echoes through the corridors of history, conjuring images of ancient civilizations and epic tales. It sounds like a mouthful, doesn't it? But break it down and it simply means the land between the rivers. And rivers there were. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers cradled this ancient land, providing not just water but a way of life. Imagine a world without Google Maps. That's how it was back then. People relied on landmarks, and rivers were like the highways of the ancient world. They were the lifelines that connected distant lands and diverse cultures. Ancient travelers and traders navigated these waterways, carrying goods, ideas, and stories from one place to another. People relied on landmarks, and rivers were like the highways of the ancient world. Mesopotamia was nestled between two mighty rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. These rivers were the lifeblood of the region, providing water for crops and transportation for people and goods. They enabled the growth of cities and the flourishing of cultures. These rivers were the lifeblood of the region, providing water for crops and transportation for people and goods. But they were also a bit moody. Floods were unpredictable, sometimes gentle, sometimes fierce. The rivers could be both a blessing and a curse. Floods were unpredictable, sometimes gentle, sometimes fierce. This unpredictable environment shaped the beliefs of the Mesopotamians. They believed in powerful gods who controlled the rivers and the land. It makes sense, right? If your life depends on something as fickle as the weather, you'd probably think a higher power was in charge too. They believed in powerful gods who controlled the rivers and the land. It makes sense, right? If your life depends on something as fickle as the weather, you'd probably think a higher power was in charge too. The Mesopotamians built temples and offered sacrifices, hoping to appease these deities and ensure their survival. If your life depends on something as fickle as the weather, you'd probably think a higher power was in charge too. The Mesopotamians built temples and offered sacrifices, hoping to appease these deities and ensure their survival. Their entire way of life was intertwined with the rhythms of the rivers, making Mesopotamia a true cradle of civilization. Mesopotamia was part of a larger region called the Fertile Crescent. Think of a giant crescent roll, but instead of dough, it's made of rich farmland stretching from Egypt to the Persian Gulf. This fertile land was a gift, allowing early humans to settle down and farm. No more chasing after woolly mammoths for dinner. But the Fertile Crescent wasn't all sunshine and roses. Remember those moody rivers? They brought challenges too. Floods could be devastating, wiping out crops and homes. And when the rivers were feeling shy, droughts could bring famine. This constant dance between abundance and scarcity made the Mesopotamians resourceful. They developed irrigation systems, like canals and ditches, to control the flow of water. They also learned to store surplus grain for lean times. Talk about planning ahead. Around 5,000 years ago, something amazing happened in Mesopotamia. People started forming cities. It wasn't a sudden overnight thing, it was more like a slow and steady evolution. Small villages clustered around farming communities gradually grew into bustling urban centers. These weren't just any cities, they were city-states, like mini-countries with their own governments and rulers. Some of the most famous ones were Ur, Uruk, and Lagash. Imagine a world without countries as we know them. Just a patchwork of independent city-states, each vying for power and influence. Life in these early cities was pretty vibrant. There were marketplaces teeming with goods, temples dedicated to the gods, and palaces for the rulers. People had specialized jobs, from farmers and artisans to merchants and priests. In the early days of Mesopotamian civilization, priests were the big shots. They were seen as intermediaries between the gods and the people. Think of them as the original influencers, but with way more incense and elaborate rituals. But power, like a mischievous river, has a way of changing course. As cities grew wealthier and more complex, a new type of leader emerged: the king. These kings were often wealthy landowners or military heroes who commanded respect and, importantly, armies. The relationship between priests and kings was complicated, kind of like that friend who sometimes borrows your stuff without asking. Sometimes they cooperated, with kings seeking the priest's blessing for their rule. Other times they clashed, each vying for ultimate control. Section 5. Cuneiform. The seeds of literacy and social stratification. Imagine a world without writing. No books, no emails, no social media posts. Communication would be limited to face-to-face interactions or perhaps rudimentary drawings. How would you send a text message or jot down a quick note to yourself? The absence of writing would make even the simplest tasks incredibly challenging. Or share a funny meme. Humor and stories would be passed down orally, losing details and nuances over time. Well, in Mesopotamia, they invented writing, and it changed everything. This innovation was a game changer, revolutionizing how people communicated and recorded information. They called it cuneiform, named after the wedge-shaped marks they made on clay tablets. These marks were meticulously carved using a stylus, transforming clay into a medium for communication. At first, cuneiform was all about keeping track of stuff. It was primarily used for administrative purposes, helping merchants and officials manage their affairs. Think receipts, contracts, and those IOUs your friend never pays back. These early records were essential for trade and commerce, ensuring that transactions were documented and disputes minimized, and those IOUs your friend never pays back. But cuneiform didn't stop there, but soon it evolved to record stories, capturing the rich oral traditions of the time. Epic tales and myths were inscribed, preserving them for future generations. Poems and even laws. The written word became a powerful tool for governance and culture, shaping the very fabric of society. Can you imagine writing an entire law code on a clay tablet? The effort and precision required were immense, but the result was a lasting record of societal rules and norms. Talk about a heavy document. These tablets were not only physically weighty, but also carried the weight of authority and tradition. Cuneiform also had a downside. The complexity of the script meant that literacy was not widespread. Not everyone could read or write. This created a divide, as those who mastered the script held significant advantages. This led to social stratification, with a literate elite holding more power and influence. Knowledge became a tool for control and governance. With a literate elite holding more power and influence, it's like that friend who always aces the spelling bee and reminds you of it. They had the keys to knowledge and used it to their advantage. It's like that friend who always aces the spelling bee and reminds you of it. In ancient Mesopotamia, literacy was a prized skill, opening doors to power and prestige. Section 6. Hammurabi's Code, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Let's fast forward a bit to the time of Hammurabi, the rockstar king of Babylon. He ruled from around 1792 to 1750 BCE and left an indelible mark on history. He's famous for his law code, a set of 282 laws carved on a massive stone pillar. This wasn't just any ordinary set of rules, it was a comprehensive legal framework. You know you've made it when your laws are literally set in stone. These laws covered everything from criminal justice to civil rights. Hammurabi's Code is known for its eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth approach. This principle of retributive justice was meant to ensure fairness and deter wrongdoing. It sounds harsh, but the idea was to create a system of justice based on retaliation. The goal was to make the punishment fit the crime, thereby maintaining social order. If you punched someone's lights out, you could expect the same in return. This was a way to discourage people from committing offenses in the first place. But Hammurabi's Code wasn't all about punishment. It was also about creating a structured society where people knew their rights and responsibilities. It also covered things like trade, marriage, and property rights. These laws helped regulate economic transactions and personal relationships. It even had laws about adoption and divorce. This shows that the Babylonians had a sophisticated understanding of family dynamics and social welfare. Who knew ancient Mesopotamia was so progressive? Their legal system was a pioneering effort in creating a balanced and fair society, influencing legal systems for millennia to come. Section 7. The Assyrian Empire, Masters of War and Governance. Now, let's talk about the Assyrians, the tough guys of Mesopotamia. They were fierce warriors who built a vast empire through conquest. Imagine a military machine, organized, disciplined, and utterly ruthless. The Assyrians were masters of military technology. They used iron weapons, chariots, and siege warfare to crush their enemies. They were also pioneers in psychological warfare, spreading terror among their foes. Let's just say they weren't known for their warm and cuddly approach to diplomacy. But the Assyrians weren't just about brute force. They were also skilled administrators who built roads, libraries, and a postal system. They even had a system of standardized weights and measures, which must have made trade a lot easier. Section 8, Legacy of Innovation from Wheels to Writing. Mesopotamia might be ancient history, but its legacy lives on. Remember those city-states? They laid the foundation for urban life as we know it, and that cuneiform writing that influenced alphabets used today. The Mesopotamians were incredible innovators. They invented the wheel, the chariot, and the sailboat. They developed mathematics, astronomy, and even brewed beer. Next time you enjoy a cold one, raise a glass to the Mesopotamians. Their stories, myths, and legends continue to fascinate us. From the Epic of Gilgamesh, a tale of friendship and the search for immortality, to the adventures of Ishtar, the goddess of love and war, Mesopotamian mythology continues to inspire artists, writers, and storytellers today. Section 9, Conclusion, Echoes of Mesopotamia in the Modern World. So, there you have it, a glimpse into the world of Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization. It's a story of innovation, resilience, and the enduring human spirit. From the fertile banks of the Tigris and Euphrates to the rise and fall of empires, Mesopotamia has left an indelible mark on human history. As you go about your day, surrounded by technology and modern conveniences, remember the ancient Mesopotamians. Their ingenuity and creativity laid the groundwork for much of what we take for granted today. And who knows, maybe their stories will inspire you to make your own mark on the world.